Hey everyone, this is Andrea Richardson. Our topic today is an important one with everything going on in the world today. The concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion are at the forefront of many people's minds. Whether it's child welfare or more broadly human service systems, systems have struggled with achieving equity with all identified groups. We know that there is an overrepresentation of diverse populations within human service systems, and that as a result, they may receive less consistent services and unequal outcomes. It is essential that all agencies are addressing issues at both the individual as well as the systems level. And with that said, because of its importance in today's culture, we are all learning, going through our own journeys to better understand what it means and what it takes to be diverse, to be equitable, and to be inclusive. And we put it this way because we don't want it to just be words that we say, but for it to also be something that we truly mean and want to affect change for ourselves as well as for others. My guests today are Dr. Christine Moses, CEO of Buffalo Cloud Consulting. She is a coach, community builder, change maker, and facilitator working with people to solve complex issues. She specifically works with people to find solutions to their social justice, equity, and inclusion communications and strategic planning issues. We are also joined with Mindy Kirrane of BerryDunn, and she's a senior consultant, public health lead, and co-lead of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee with BerryDunn. Mindy works with states around improvement projects and finding creative and sustainable solutions that align with their organizational goals. She is passionate about identifying opportunities and creating solutions to enhance health equity, particularly around underserved and vulnerable populations. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, great. So, Dr. Moses, you are the CEO of Buffalo Cloud Consulting. Explain what Buffalo Cloud Consulting does.
We help organizations in their equity journey. I have many years of communications, community engagement experience, as well as 60 years of being a biracial Black woman in the United States. And so the last 10 years, I have really focused on my equity journey and helping organizations through their equity journey. And so it is facilitating, educating, holding space, doing strategic planning with an equity lens, a lot of different ways that equity can show up in supporting organizations.
Perfect. And Mindy, as a senior consultant and co-lead for the DEI committee, explain how you are bringing the concept of DEI into what you do.
Absolutely, and thanks so much for having me, Andrea, and great to be here sharing this time with you, Dr. Moses. One thing that we're very excited about in the public health practice at BerryDunn is that states are really starting to recognize that DEI means more than just saying you are interested in DEI. Communities are getting more involved in providing sustainable, applicable solutions that really support their vulnerable communities so that there can be equitable health provided and accessible to all populations. So we're seeing that in a much more tangible and concrete way than we previously were. There's more than ever, and obviously exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, one size does not fit all. One size will not support all populations in the way that they need support. So what we're doing with the public health practice is supporting state agencies identify those solutions, working with them to how to reach the different populations. And what's really exciting is that as a firm, internally, we're also recognizing what that means to be representative as an organization in the workplace for diversity, equity, inclusion, but also belonging and access among our own employees. So it's that kind of workforce element in addition to what we provide to our clients.
So Dr. Moses and also Mindy, so I feel like the concept of DEI is something that, while it's been around for a long time, I think it's one of those that people are like, I kind of know what it is. I'm not quite sure. I have an inkling about it. Dr. Moses, can you tell us what is DEI? How did it come about? Can you sort of the background a little bit?
I look at it as a mindset. Diversity is about having a wide array of people at the table, and the table is the decision-making process. Inclusion is who is there? How does that decision get made? How do those historically minoritized voices get centered? How do we shift the power structures in order to be able to center those voices? Mm-hmm. And then equity is acknowledging the historical harms that have happened that keep the disproportional outcomes in place. And so what are identifying those barriers and then tearing down those barriers, and even maybe giving those communities extra supports in order to be able to have that level playing field that we all say we want. Mm-hmm. But we need to get people up to those places through capacity building or different types of supports in order for that level playing field to happen. And I want to defer to Mindy around what equity means for BerryDunn, because it means different things for different organizations. Mm-hmm. And understanding that we're working with culture, we're working with systemic level, we're working with an institutional level, and we're working with an individual level. Mm-hmm. Those four levels are always at play whenever we're doing this type of work. So I want to defer to Mindy around what BerryDunn's equity definition is.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's something that BerryDunn is very excited about. We are cognizant that we don't have those defined words for what we mean by that. But if anything, the one thing that we have come together is to recognize that we want a more inclusive environment. And we know that one solution, one strategy, one approach means approaching all different communities and knowing we don't know what that solution will be. It's such an organic process right now, but the one thing that we are aware of is that what we propose will probably not work for everyone. And mm-hmm. being uncomfortable in that space, knowing we've got a long way to go, but we are excited to know more about that journey and bring in the experts to help us get there. I think it's that really wallowing in our ignorance of saying, we don't know, we don't have the solutions, we aren't the experts, but we want to learn and we want to make it a place where if there are communities that we haven't recognized and supported thus far, we want to be able to provide that in the future. So that's where we are right now. And I think there's just a universal understanding that we want support and we know that we don't have all the answers.
Mm-hmm. Some of those, riff off of that, if you don't mind. Sure. Some of those really important competencies when we're stepping in as consultants, because, we're consultants. We're supposed to know everything. People are hiring us for our expertise, right? And I have found that if I don't know what the outcome is going to be, I'm okay. Mm-hmm. Because the wisdom's in the room. Mm-hmm. I don't have to have a TikTok. I don't have to have an agenda down to the minute. What I do have to have is the ability to listen deeply and to be in the moment, regulate myself, and make connections between people. If I can do that, then the answer to the question or the problem or the issue is gonna bubble up. And believing in myself enough as a facilitator, as a consultant, has really been a journey to discovery, curiosity, inquiry, and not knowing. Like if I just know that it's going to be great because I'm going to create a space where people get to show up and figure it out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't have the answers. That for a consultant is a very hard place to be. And that's what I think is the magic that allows real community engagement to happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that, and I think it brings up a good question, because you think about, okay, as a consultant, you want to be able to come in and work with agencies and kind of say, okay, let's have this conversation around this topic area that I may not know which direction it's going to go, or like how we're going to work it through, and be okay with that. Are there competencies? Are there like skills that, if I'm an agency leader and I'm thinking about like making, kind of going on this journey, both, as a person, but also as my agency, as my team, and kind of thinking about becoming more DEI competent and sort of inclusive within my organization? Are there skills or competencies that I need to kind of consider, that I need to make sure that are in place so that this conversation I have and this journey that I'm on is successful? Are there things I need to kind of look out for?
I'll kind of bounce off of Dr. Moses's last response and really highlight the importance of listening and hearing from your community. I mean, in the public health history, it's been so common to go into a community, come up with a solution, and put this on communities, and it surprisingly is not sustainable. It doesn't work. There's much more of a shift now to hear directly from the participants of the community what their needs are. And I think understanding and recognizing that there are those differences. So not only in taking the time to hear from within the community, but also knowing that there can be a variety of different solutions. There can be a variety of different tools that can be applied and proposed, because various communities may engage and interact with different solutions in very different ways. That's not to say various different solutions are the right way, but to be really flexible and open to that there may be alternatives that may be more appropriate for particular communities in digesting and understanding and applying these principles in ways that work for them. So I think a flexibility, and listening, and then communicating in ways that the various different populations can communicate. It might be a different language, it might be a different lived experience that you engage with different personnel, but having that flexibility is going to be essential.
I think from a personal perspective, the sector lead, the office lead, the team lead really needs to be on their equity journey. Mm-hmm. And that is listen, believe, and reflect. It is, using the Racial Healing Handbook. It is really spending time with other people who are not like you. Mm-hmm. So you can identify your biases, but more importantly, normalize conversations around race at work. Mm-hmm. Like that is a really important skill. And that's where that's where discomfort sits. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we want to bypass that we want to bypass that because we hate sitting and being, not comfortable. Mm-hmm. But that's where breathing comes in. That's where our breath work, meditation, mindfulness, all of that self-regulation. So I, as a leader, as a team leader, can hold these conversations in safer containers. Mm-hmm. Having community agreements around when we're stepping into these conversations is really important too. Mm-hmm. But it's doing the hard work of identifying our biases, identifying our needs, and then stepping in to be the bridge across to the client, across to the junior staff member, to the senior staff member, to the community, and just bringing those bridging, facilitation, and deep listening skills into the room will help change the tenor of the meeting.
Mm-hmm. It almost sounds like in some ways, some parts of what you said, Dr. Moses and Mindy, is that as social workers, most of us are social workers who have been in child welfare and human services. It's almost like we have to use those good social work skills that we use with the families, but we need to use it both with ourselves and kind of tuning in, but also use those engagement skills and the work that we do internally as we're kind of like working as with coworkers and kind of improving the way that we do things internally within our organization. Yeah. So
one of my triggers is I want to play devil's advocate. Okay. That to me is like my antenna has just shot up and I am like, ding, 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 ding. Yeah, no. We're not playing anything. I want you to speak from use I statements, speak from your own perspective, and then let's move forward. So I have to know my triggers in order to be a great facilitator in that moment.
Yeah. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. How about so if I'm really present, if I'm really engaging, if I'm using those I statements and I'm really listening and I'm being flexible, what can be the impact in an agency when I'm really doing DEI work?
Mindy, what have you found?
I think one thing has been it takes a while to get there. So to start with, I think it takes honesty and a real acceptance for one's own person to recognize their own biases and act in a way that's different. So I think the starting place for definitely members of the DEIVA Council at BerryDunn has been a recognition of where they're starting and what that is. From there, what the impact would be is that sitting in that uncomfortable space and owning that, but then transitioning into that's okay. It's uncomfortable. I am this way, most likely as a result of the structures that have been in my past that have led me to be this way. That does not mean that I'm actively trying to proceed in a different way, but I'm a product of my experiences. Now, what can I do in my environment, in our case at BerryDunn, to move the needle, to get leadership even more on board and understand? Fortunately, our leadership team is super supportive, but what does that mean? How do we translate that into practice? So I think it's navigating that gap between I am here and I am open and willing to support DEI principles at my firm, but that's not going to be an overnight activity. So how do I get others like me on board, and how do I make that transition more meaningful and realistic? Because we can put plans into place, we can strategies, we can have all of that on paper. But I think that's kind of where we as a society we have addressed that DEI before. But how do we actually make that impact? And that's the challenge I think people are recognizing. What does that impact mean? And what can I do with the skills and the knowledge that I have with where I'm at right now?
Yeah. Dr. Moses?
Yeah, two things. I love that knowing that there's paper versus reality, right? And it's giving yourselves permission to just go make a mistake. We're just going to make mistakes. We don't have to sit in blame and shame and guilt. We may feel them, but we can move through them to responsibility. And being in affinity group, whether it's, a white caucus or a black caucus or LGBTQ caucus or affinity group work, helps us to support each other through those really hard times, because we're all going to hit that really hard time. And that's where forgiveness I think forgiveness and compassion are so critical to this work. Forgiveness for ourselves, compassion for ourselves and our learning. Can't do it without it. And then what I did with Michelle Kennedy when we were doing the strategic planning process with the city of Gresham, Oregon, was really starting with the city council and doing equity work with them. And so they were the main leaders of the strategic planning process. And so they needed to know what diversity, equity, inclusion meant to them. They needed their own agreements, community agreements. They needed to begin to build empathy for each other as well as for the different constituents in their communities. So I think those 6 hours of building community with them led to a more equitable strategic plan for them to be able to lean into and then support over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. So it sounds like you need, as an individual, you need kind of the skills of, tuning in and listening and being flexible, being okay with being uncomfortable and being open to how the conversation goes and okay with, hey, we're all going to make mistakes and that's okay. We're going to keep learning together. And that at each level of an organization, you almost need to give each level grace to be able to take the time to kind of learn their pieces and have their journeys and then, kind of come together as a team. And that just kind of trickles down to each level and eventually to the communities that they work with. Dr. Moses, have you seen where in communities where that has really blossomed and work? What kinds of things might you see when it's done well?
You see how the community voice is actually the driver of the change, where engagement is shifted from come to City Hall to going to where the community is, creating events and engagements that meet their needs, whether it's language or childcare or food or whatever the needs are, and then being able to bring that information back that's actionable, that changes the behavior inside of the government, inside of the departments. And so, again, I mean, this is systems change is like 3 to 7 years.
At least.
Like,
at least.
So it's very cool that the city of Gresham has hired me to also now do their diversity, equity, and inclusion work with their DEI team, right? And they're using targeted universalism as their North Star in order to center their equity work that is now going to begin to change the way the staff work. And so, yeah, I'll let you know in 3 to 7 years.
Okay. Well, we'll be watching just to see how that goes. Well, I would like to thank both Dr. Moses and Mindy for joining us today on this important topic. Please join us next time as we do part 2 of our discussion, where we will talk about moving from theory to practice, and then also around our engagement work with our communities and also with our teams. It's going to be a good one. You're going to want to for sure take a listen and take care.